specialization of labor. We have development of, what else can we develop for the first time? When you really have this under nomadic ways of life. Civilizations, and even before that though, social classes. Yeah, you can have specialized labor, but you're also going to have social classes, you got development of land, and that's good stuff. So basically all that big story that we kind of went through yesterday with the agricultural revolution is going to lead us into the concept of having civilizations. Okay? We got the earliest civilizations, and some of the basic stuff you might get on the test is being able to compare some of the real big basics of early civilizations. I think the good part about this portion of the test is that while it's going to be the oldest stuff to remember, so you might have to conjure something back and say, I gotta go way back to like September in my memory banks. That's the hard part. The easy part is the question they're going to ask you is probably not going to be that difficult. You're probably going to leave that section thinking like those were some pretty, I don't say this, easy questions, but those weren't all that bad. You feel pretty good about the problem. All right? So you're going to be asked just the basics on characteristics of civilizations. Remember some of the things we said about characteristics of civilizations. They have to have specific and unique social classes. They have to have, or they typically do have, a religion or religious structure, I guess is a better way to put it. By the way, when we say religious structure, your earliest civilizations, starting about 8,000 BCE, what are most of these religions looking like back in these days? What's that?
Many gods.
Yeah, so from a religious structure, most of these are polytheistic. You guys would, you'd be able to define the difference between polytheistic and monotheistic, right? One god, many gods, obviously. All right, so many of them are polytheistic. Most of the gods in some of these early civilizations, what do they usually center on? Agriculture, their day-to-day livelihood, right? So I want to have a god that helps with the crops, and I need a sun god, and a rain god, and this god, and that god. You know, typically ones that deal with agriculture or warfare, right? Because think about what their day-to-day life pretty much usually centered on was abundant harvests and growing things, and also agriculture. So most of the religious structures typically polytheistic. You got to have social classes. You also have to have some sort of like government makeup. Now we're not going to say that the governments were super sophisticated back in the day, but there is some sort of power structure. Typically, how's power shared back in these early civilizations? What does it look like? Yeah, typically like large, powerful warriors, singular, powerful leaders. You know, are we talking democratic governments here? Absolutely not. So we don't have democracy. We don't have sharing power. Typically, it's autocratic. It's one powerful leader. It's based on families. It's based on some of those factors. So you have the social class, the religion, the government. We also have to have some sort of like economic system typically. All right, and they're not really complex economic systems this early on. But typically, what it involves is the trading of items from one place where those items might not be as abundant, so someplace else. So we're going to have some sort of trading system or some sort of economic system, obviously, in place here as well. What else are we talking about here? I guess what else are we missing?
Water.
Okay, what would that be an example of? You're absolutely right that early civilizations were usually around water sources. So the ability to access water and utilize your environment here, what is that an aspect of that all of these civilizations had to have? Okay, so let's kind of think about like location, and let's just kind of put that on the side here. Is like water source has to be there, but the acquisition of the water, utilizing the water for your crops, getting it to where it needs to be, that's irrigation, right? And what is that kind of like a broad example of? That's going to be something all across the board here. Technology or intellectual advancements. You know what I'm saying? So the last thing to kind of think about is technology or intellectualism. And typically, if you get anything about how did humans utilize technology, these early civilizations, it typically has something to do with water. It has something to do with irrigation, right? How are they able to farm? You know, you use water for everything. Water for cooking, water for cleaning, water for transportation. Think about all different ways some of those early societies use water in all their different ways of life here. So that's the real big part. Guys, are you on, or could you turn to, I think this is the spot where we left off last time, which was that, remember the spot where I told you, it's got 10 on the bottom of the page there, and it's the spot where I said this is what the AP people say you have to know here. And I'm kind of taking it directly off there. But you know there's that one section where it talks about locating world history with environment, and what's the other one they talk about is human environmental interactions. Well, if you get any human environmental interaction questions here, it's probably going to deal with irrigation. It's probably going to deal with how people were able to access water and make that work for them. So how are people able to develop agriculture, how they're able to use technology, those type of examples, how that basically kind of plays a role. All right, so let's kind of take it from there. These are our very, very general questions. Am I thinking you're getting tons of questions on all this stuff? Probably not, okay? But here's kind of our magic year. Our magic year of early civilizations, and kind of think about this timeline-wise, is going to be the year 8000 BCE, okay? And in that magic year of 8000 BCE, what we say takes place next then is we get the earliest, what we kind of consider here, and we, for simplicity's sake, we just call these guys what are known as the early civilizations, okay? So, for this early part of world history, you guys have to know the list. And I'm not saying we have to be absolute experts on every last thing for these guys, but what I'd like to kind of do is just run through with you guys what you sort of remember about these folks, and I can offer you a little bit of advice as to probably what's like the 2 or 3 most important things to remember for each of them. If you know those already, you feel good about it, then we're probably kind of good to move on. All of our early civilizations, like you said, had some things in common. They're all around water sources. That's obviously, that just goes without saying. But the different ones that we learned about, guys, were in these different regions, and we would have to be able to identify them, not only from where they're located, but also characteristics they have there. So, first one is, and you guys have these listed here, is Mesopotamia. Okay? Mesopotamia. You guys remember where Mesopotamia is located? Where's that?
It's in the Middle East, kind of.
By what modern-day country?
India.
Nope, further away than that.
China. Iran.
Turkey's getting closer.
Saudi Arabia.
Getting a little bit closer. Yeah, all right, so Mesopotamia, generally speaking, think about the country of Iraq today. All right, it's right down the heart of Iraq, but you could really call Mesopotamia. It could extend into parts of what is today Saudi Arabia. It could extend into parts of Turkey today. It could extend into parts of Iran or Syria today. It's basically kind of like the heart of the Middle East today, is Mesopotamia. The name Mesopotamia, remember that word means land between the rivers. Mesopotamia has, do you guys remember the name of the 2 rivers in Mesopotamia? Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Very good. Remember that. Okay? And I'm not saying necessarily there'll be a question on the test that says name these 2 rivers, but okay, those are the names, Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Okay, Mesopotamia. What do you guys suppose are the 2 or 3 things that maybe you want to know about Mesopotamia? Who are some names of groups that kind of pop into your mind when you think of Mesopotamia here? Some folks that are out there, some groups. I'll give you a hint here, guys. Mesopotamia, this was, remember the summer you did the 6 civilizations? You did those civilization charts, remember, in the beginning? Remember any of those groups? Babylonians, all right? Hittites. Any other groups kind of come to mind? Assyrians. That's Phoenicians. Hebrews. And I think the last one was Sumerians. Did we say them? You said that one? Okay. Now again, do you have to know every single last thing about every one of those groups? No, but here's what I'd like you guys to do. Could we name a thing or 2 about one or more of those groups? Like for instance, if you were to get a question on, and I'm trying to make this as easy as possible, if you were to get a question on the Babylonians, anybody have an idea as to what they're going to ask you probably about Babylonians? Give you a hint, it has something to do with one of their leaders. Hammurabi. Exactly. You guys remember Hammurabi? What is he known for? Hammurabi's Code. Okay? They're going to ask you about Hammurabi's Code. Does anybody want to predict what is the question they would probably ask you about Hammurabi's Code? Yeah, we know it's eye for an eye justice. You take out the eye of a man, your eye's taken out, that sort of thing, right? But what was the other kind of special circumstance we found with eye for an eye justice? It wasn't always fair among social classes, right? And I guess maybe fair is a bad word that I shouldn't use. It's not that it wasn't fair. Fairness, maybe it was laid out for everybody, right? It was showcased. Maybe they're admitting their unfairness. It wasn't equal. It didn't treat different people equally, obviously. Okay? But what was Hammurabi's Code the first example of? The first time ever in human history, we've actually got what with our laws?
Written laws.
But they're written, right? They're down. Actually, they wrote them in stone. That whole idea, like the law is written in stone. You know, that's kind of to say, like, you can't get rid of it. Well, that's where it kind of comes from. The laws were on stone tablets, and he displayed them all around the empire. It was the first time that we have legal traditions. It wasn't the first time we had laws in society. It was the first time that rulers said, we want to write them down. Okay? You know what that prevented rulers from doing then? Changing them. Exactly. Just so like the ruler's having a bad day, and he wants to come in and say, you know, no, I don't really like the way you look, so I'm going to make your punishment this much more worse. Or I'm having a bad day because my wife's fighting with me or something like that. So I'm going to really take it out on this like poor chump. Right? Hammurabi's code said, no, if you do this, this is your punishment. First step towards civilized law codes. Which, by the way, what would they maybe ask you about Hammurabi's code? They might say, what do Hammurabi's code and the Roman legal code system have in common? Think about that. Roman law. And again, probably the answer goes something like along the lines of, they were both kind of like steps towards written, succinct laws and movement away from arbitrary forms of justice or random forms of justice, something like that. Okay? But got big similarities between Hammurabi's code, Roman law. Hey, throw in there the Hebrews, Moses and the Hebrews, 10 Commandments. Isn't that a legal code? It's a legal code from God. A lot of different legal codes kind of coming on there, and they all got kind of some things in common, right? Of right and wrong, and punishments usually typically being very swift. Okay? So that's your Babylonian question, right? Hammurabi's code. All right. You gonna get any questions on, I'm gonna kind of skip through some of these other ones. Assyrians and Sumerians, probably not a lot of questions there. Once in a while, Sumerians, they might talk about their leader called Gilgamesh. Remember like the first pages of like the first part of chapter 2 was about that book called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was, it was basically this really, really famous story written several thousand years ago about the Sumerians and about one of their leaders named Gilgamesh. He's just very significant because he appears in the story, and it tells us a lot about their culture and their society. But probably not a lot of Sumerian stories, probably not a lot of Assyrian questions. Some other ones you might get. You might get a question on, I know some people had said, Phoenicians, right? You guys remember the deal with the Phoenicians here? They're the alphabet people. And what else do they kind of do for their way of life here? They were kind of located in present day, over by like Lebanon today, right on the coast of the Mediterranean, weren't they? So if they're on the Mediterranean coast, what were they also probably doing? They're traders. They were seafaring traders, great boats, great shipbuilders. And so if you're a shipbuilder and you're a boat and a trader and stuff like that, remember the reason why you want to have an alphabet is because what do they kind of have in mind? They wanted to create records. They wanted business records so they could kind of monitor all their transactions, and it kind of made sense for them. So the Phoenicians are the first ones with the alphabet. Our alphabet today has remnants going back to the Phoenicians, because the Phoenicians, you saw that diffused basically up towards the Minoan Greeks, all right, in the days of ancient Greece, and then from there it goes elsewhere throughout Europe, and actually our alphabet today goes way back to that. That's why you get the name, for instance, like phonics. Look down phonics, like helps kids read and stuff. Phonics, Phoenicians. Right, language, alphabet. Okay. So there's your Phoenicians: alphabet, business people, sailors. Okay. Who else are we leaving out here? Hittites. I don't know if you're gonna get. I don't know if I've ever heard of any Hittite questions in the past. Hittites were. They had great. They were great iron workers. They had great iron chariots. They were great warriors. They were kind of from modern day Turkey. Hittites were up there. Who's the other one we're leaving out then? I think Hebrews. All right, last one, Hebrews. What makes Hebrews different? And they're a religious story and a political story here, but they're the first ones to introduce monotheism, right? Hebrews, monotheistic. Hebrews, basically a separate ethnic group within Mesopotamia here. Remember, founder of the Hebrews? Who's the father, really, of the modern, the Hebrew movement? Abraham, absolutely. Father being Abraham. Abraham, remember the story? It's all depicted in the Old Testament here about Abraham being promised a son, having a wife that could not give birth because of her advanced age, and ultimately being blessed with that son, and being told by God that he would be the father of a great many people, obviously, to inhabit the earth. So, father of basically the Hebrews, and whenever you see Hebrews, synonymous, remember, with Jews. Hebrews, it's the Jewish people. It's the people that then basically flee parts of Mesopotamia to go live in the land of Judea, which the Hebrews believe that their one monotheistic God has promised them from improvements. Okay? We'll get more to them when we talk. We're going to do a wrap-up on religions real quick, but they obviously coincide with that real quick at this point in time. So that's our Mesopotamia. Probably more questions there than from some of the other ones. Who's some of our other groups then on that sheet there? We got Mesopotamia. What else we got? Got the Harappans. Okay, where's Harappans from? Oops. Where are they from?
India.
Harappans are from India. Absolutely, the Harappans are from India. I always ask people this. Say, what are the Harappans known for? No doubt, every time somebody says, I always remember what it is. What is it?
Toilets.
Toilets. You guys remember when I said Harappans were the toilet people? They're the people that invented kind of like the world's first sewage systems. So they did have toilets, right? Now, I don't know if that's going to be the question they ask us, but yes, the Harappans are from India. The Harappans, remember they have that relationship to those people called Dravidians? The people in India called Dravidians, those darker skinned Indian individuals here. They have an advanced society in India. What are our rivers, by the way, in India that you live on? You got the Indus River, is pretty much your big one. You do have the Ganges River as well in India, but typically you're talking about the Indus River in India, where the Harappans live. You guys remember what happens to Harappan society, though? Harappan culture? What do we know a lot about it? Remember what happened to it? There's a huge flood and earthquake that covered all of it. It's basically beneath the water table. Not a lot of stuff is actually known about it, other than some of the oral traditions there. When we talk Harappans, we're also going to talk about, you guys remember the name of the group that comes in and invades the Harappans, invades India? The light-skinned, what's called? The Aryans. Yeah, the light-skinned Aryans, and that's going to be kind of the start of our Hinduism discussion, because the Aryans are going to bring their Aryan gods into India and kind of develop and kind of create the caste system, kind of keep the lighter-skinned people on top and the darker-skinned people elsewhere, and kind of sort of create the beginnings of the Indian caste system. Okay, so we'll kind of get to the rest of that a little bit too. All right, so those are our Harappans. 1 or 2 questions there, maybe, but also maybe not. Last few ones, this was chapter 3, we kind of skipped over pretty quickly, but ancient Egypt. And I'd kind of skip over this pretty quick because how many people remember doing like a mummy project in 6th grade social studies about ancient Egyptians? Seems like that's like a real famous one that we sort of know about, right? No? You have to do so. I thought like in elementary school you always do like ancient Egypt is like the one that everybody just loves, and you go like somebody dresses up as King Tut or something. You do any of that stuff? Okay. I kind of skip over Egypt pretty quick because I think that Egypt is probably one of the places that people have the most they kind of know about. Is that fair to say? Yeah. I mean, think about it. Ancient Egypt. All right, they're polytheistic. They have, remember their leaders in Egypt are called what? So it's the pharaohs. All right, pharaohs are considered to be ruler and god. Okay, so they kind of have this multi-hat approach here they're wearing. What else here with the ancient Egyptians, as we talked about here? Polytheistic, has lots of slavery. River in Egypt is the Nile River. Okay, so you got the Nile River. Nile River flooded very regularly, so it was very, very easy to plant crops, and they were basically Egypt was a successful society for like over 1,000 years because they had a really, really regular set on how they kind of operated their farming. The other big thing with Egypt, I know this was kind of mentioned before, there's one on the map here. Remember the deal with Egypt? Made them different from elsewhere? Egypt had a lot of natural barriers, deserts on both sides. The river with the cataracts beneath it, the Mediterranean Sea, it was really hard to invade Egypt. Whereas Mesopotamia, people were in and out of there like crazy. Constant turnover. Egypt basically got to develop themselves for about 1,000 years or so. Okay? So that's our Egyptians. Last couple of groups then, we have the Chinese, right? And our Chinese societies, we just call them the Chinese River Valley societies, living along the Huanghe River, the Yangtze River in China. And some of the characteristics we kind of looked at with the Chinese, of course, some of the same characteristics as before, right? River dwellers, people that live near the river for agricultural purposes. But the other things that are kind of mentioned during ancient Chinese societies here is we are going to kind of get into and are going to talk about the earliest of the Chinese dynasties. And we're kind of spend a little bit of time later talking about that. But if you kind of remember when we talked China at this point, this is where we introduced the beginning of the whole lineage of Chinese dynasties. Next, maybe one of our review sessions, what we might do is put like every Chinese dynasty, just say like, let's just review China in one day. All right, that might not be a bad idea to just kind of start it off. But this was the point where we did Chinese dynasties, the first 3 called the Xia, Shang, and Su dynasties. Okay, and I'm thinking, like I said, for another day, we might just do kind of China separate and do a review session of that. Okay? Does anybody have any questions on kind of what we really briefly went through? These are what we call, what type of civilizations again? River Valley, and also known as, you call them River Valley civilizations, or I was going to say ancient civilizations. Okay? What we'll also do later as we move on is we're going to talk about classical civilizations, which come next. Classical being Greece, Rome, Persia, and others. India, China, classical as well. Yes, ma'am?
When are we doing the weekend?
What we're tentatively planning for is the April 27th, April 28th time frame, unless I hear from people that that's really bad. April 27th, April 28th, and you come to one or the other. So it's a Saturday or a Sunday, what works the best. I'll throw some times up probably next week on that. That's what we're tentatively looking at. All right, Mr. Votes here providing some help here, but you also know as well, what we're going to try to do for most of these is we're going to try to record them, and I would like to get these up and kind of post these. So, you know, if you miss one.
I'll be teaching World APWorld next
Mr. Vogt is
year.
teaching a couple sections of APWorld next year, so we're kind of getting things squared away on how it's gonna go and how it's gonna kind of work. But we're gonna record some of these, so